Coordinator for PDA here in Massachusetts, and welcome to our, I think, 8th annual August PDA Picnic. Tim Carpenter started this back in Look Park years ago. We're taking to heart Jim Hightower's suggestion that not only do we work, but we also get together and have fun. His suggestion was we meet in bars, but I'm not sure we can do that. But here we are, and thank you everybody for coming. On the way over here, I was thinking about how things have changed in a year. Last year, Jim McGovern was talking about how we have to take back the House, and boy, we took back the House. We had, 3 legislative races. We had candidates for the state legislature, the state senate here. And, those elections happened, and I can say, as being an outsider from Berkshire County, that the people here in this district really know how to vote for the right people, because we've got some great representatives and senators here. So before we start, I think all of us have been involved in politics a long time. I think a lot of us get weary, get tired. And we look to some of the people who have been doing it for longer. We think of Francis Crowe, who passed away this week. Archie Markham passed away in the spring at 100 years old. And we also think of the young kids who are coming here in sailboats from Sweden and fighting in Florida. So we could just start with a moment of silence to think of the past and hope for the future, and then we'll start. Okay, thanks everybody. We're going to give a lot of people a chance to talk. I thought we'd start with Mindy Domb, who's the representative from this district. Where did you go? Here you are. Say a few words.
Hi everybody, I'm Mindy Domb. Okay. Welcome to the 3rd Hampshire District. I'm thrilled to be here. I was able to come last year when we were in a different location, and Alex was just showing me some pictures of why that location is not available this year. But I'm thrilled that you do this in Amherst and that I can be part of it. I hope you don't mind, I just wrote down some things that I wanted to make sure that I remembered to say, so I'm going to be looking down at an index card. I wanted to, first of all, express deep gratitude for the work of PDA in all races across our district, our state, and our country. And we need to sort of keep that going and keep motivated around 2020, not only to take back the White House, but to also take back the Senate and make that majority bigger for Congressman Jim in the House. So there is going to be an effort to make sure that folks in Western Mass who want to plug into those races are able to do it. And I don't have that information with me, but I know that people like Elizabeth Silver, who were sort of very key in doing Take Back the House last year, will also be involved in helping us take back the Senate, particularly in Maine. So think about that and keep that in mind, as well as your whatever other races you're thinking about. Rest up. It's going to be a very busy year. And that's okay, that's good, right? Dinah was just telling me she likes the cold weather because she can fight harder. So I love that, and it's good because we're going into the colder weather. I just wanted to also say a few things that are coming up in the next 2 weeks that you might be interested in the State House. This coming Wednesday, and I don't mean to rob thunder from my colleagues, but there are 3 bills that I just want to point out. One is the bill that would allow driver's licenses to go to all Massachusetts residents regardless of their documentation status. And that's a public hearing, so you can either show up or you can send in your testimony, and I know there's lots of us here today. You can send it to your rep or your state senator, and I know all of us will feel honored to make sure that that gets to the right hands in the committee. There's also on the same day an education committee public hearing, and there are 3 bills on that one that I particularly want to talk about. One is breakfast after the bell. I know it's a issue very close to Congressman McGovern's heart around making sure that every student in Massachusetts has breakfast. And the other one is around meal debt. And some of you may not know that Amherst is a leader on this issue regarding reducing any shame or stigma there is to families who may not have enough money to get lunch but who have not signed up for lunch, and then creating a debt that then they somehow have to pay back. And there's legislation that would make Amherst's model statewide, so I just want to bring that to your attention. There's also a bill on Wednesday, some of the younger folks here may like this, that makes recess mandatory in Massachusetts. I am a believer in that, for actually people of all ages. I'm on recess, so I think everybody should be on recess. Next week, there are two bills that I've co-filed that I just also want to bring to your attention. One of them is I've co-filed with Senator Comerford. Representatives Blay and Sabadosa from the area are also co-sponsors. And this would allow, I'm sorry, Senator Eldridge, I didn't check to see if you were, I didn't it would allow gender-neutral or gender-inclusive bathrooms to be installed in public buildings without needing a variance. And this is one of those bills that's sort of a no-brainer, except that, believe it or not, we have a plumbing code in Massachusetts, and it requires gendered bathrooms. So we're introducing this bill to sort of correct it. That's not this week, but the next week. And at the same time, there's a bill that I get to co-file with Red Decker that Senator Comerford was expert in leading to a 59-1 victory in the Senate in the spring, which would allow for a non-binary marker on all state forms and applications. So this is for folks who don't identify either as masculine or feminine, but choose to identify as non-binary, to be able to have a place to see themselves in all state forms and applications. It's critically important. It's not just driver's licenses, it's birth certificates, and for my part, it's also voter registration forms. So that bill has a, thank you. I know I said it very fast, but I just want to point out that that bill's already passed the Senate, thanks to Senator Comerford and Senator Eldridge, but I'm going to have to her thus. You're out here, so. But I also feel that it was 59-1 in the Senate, and that's incredible. So both, I have to both of you for that. In the Senate. Now we have the House, where we have 160 people, so we'll be pushing that boulder up. Representatives Sabadosa and Blay are also co-sponsors on that, so Western Mass, I think, is very well represented. In the next couple of weeks, I'm sorry if I'm taking more than my allotted time, next Thursday we have the Department of Energy Resources coming to Amherst, to UMass, to have a discussion about their review of the SMART or solar program. Those of you who have solar, know people who want solar or have solar, have a lot of questions and comments and suggestions for the state, and this is a great opportunity to come and hear what they are suggesting so that we can come back to them with more written comments. That's on the 5th. You can find out more information on Facebook, on my page, I think on Senator Comerford's page, and on September 9th, at the invitation of Representative Lay, Representative Jen Benson will be coming to Western Mass to talk about her carbon fee legislation. And so when we talk about structural change, we're also talking about how do we change the paradigm around our energy usage, consumption, and how do we incentivize what we want to incentivize. Carbon fee is a big piece of that, and she'll be out here on September 9th. It's a good opportunity for those of you, and many of you in my district, I heard it during the campaign, are concerned about carbon fee, to have an opportunity to talk to the author of the legislation about how you can best support her efforts to advance that. I'm working on census issues in Amherst, and so you're all welcome to join me, see me today, contact me after today, around how we can make sure that we have an accurate, safe count in the 3rd Hampshire District. And so we've already started to meet as a community. We're hoping to have a festival of sorts leading up to the census. The great thing about the census is there's a deadline. It comes out at the end of March, early April, and so as organizers, we know what we have to do up until then. There's a lot of fear around the census. A lot of it may be legitimate, and a lot of it is based on the climate of fear that the occupant of the White House has been creating. But it's really important that we try to get an accurate count, because if we don't, we'll lose political power and we'll lose political resources. And so if you want to plug into that local effort, please let me know. The only other thing I really want to talk about that's going on in the State House is Senator Barrett's bill, actually, around transparency in tax returns for presidential primaries, because that is very time sensitive. He introduced this bill. It would require that presidential candidates release their tax returns in order to be on the ballot in Massachusetts, and it has not yet been scheduled for a hearing because the primary is March 3rd, and we would want that to be in place. So I would encourage you, if you feel strongly about this, to write to the Election Laws Committee. It's S383, and urge them to schedule a public hearing on it and move it, because we need to be able to make sure that that's moving through. People have said to me, it's unlikely that will pass, perhaps, but I think it's very likely that people need to know that we're concerned about it, and that we want it in Massachusetts. I just want to end by saying I'm very honored and grateful to have the trust of the 3rd Hampshire District to be a voice, to lend my voice, your voice, to efforts that are going on. And I really appreciate this opportunity, and I don't take it lightly. I decided that when people call me rep in Boston, it's appropriate because there's 40,000 people behind me, and I want them to know that. And in Amherst, just call me Mindy, please. But I also want to say, as a constituent, I'm also very honored and grateful that we elected Senator Comerford to the state senate. Please, she will be totally embarrassed about this, so I'm not going to do it. But you could not have given me a stronger, smarter, sorry Jamie, more strategic, I'm sure your reps feel the same way about you, more strategic, more kind, and more funny, and eloquent, quite frankly, state senator to be a partner with. And I am deeply grateful because it allows me to be a better state rep, to have a really effective partner in the other branch. So thank you so much, and I hope I didn't overstate my case.
Thank you, Mindy. One of the issues the PDA has been working on since Tim Carpenter founded us back in 2005 is single-payer health care. And we're delighted to have both members of the chairs of the single-payer caucus here in Massachusetts with us. So we want to have Lindsay Sabadosa come up and talk a little bit about that or whatever else she wants to talk about, what's going on.
Thank you. It's always great to go to events in district. It's particularly wonderful to go to events where I know I'm surrounded by progressives in district. So give yourself a round of applause, please. I never quite know what I'm going to say when I get asked to speak at these events because I feel like I can't prep too much because it's just not me. I need to kind of feel what I want to talk about today. And definitely single payer is a thing that I want to talk about. It's been so exciting to get into the State House and to be able to take up a fight that I've been passionate about for such a long time. And to work with this man here, who right after I got elected was probably my very first call when I said, great, so what are we going to do about this? How are we going to move this forward? And he knows I call a lot. Because this session, for me, is about how we lay the groundwork to move in a new direction, in an exciting direction. And I am proud to have partners. You mentioned myself and Senator Eldridge as co-chairs, but also Senator Comerford is a co-chair of the Single Payer Caucus. Representative Guevara from Acton is also a co-chair. So we have built a real statewide coalition to work on this issue that I know is important to you, but important to so many of us. Because the stories that I hear every day in district inspire my work. It's impossible to feel like you know everything when you go into the State House. You just don't. But when you come home and you sit down with people who show up at office hours, and we have worked at like creating crazy office hours, right? We do office hours on buses, we do office hours in parks. We're trying to really get out into the community because we want to talk to the people that aren't likely to show up at their state rep's office. And the stories that I hear from those people every single day are, do you realize I am working to pay for health care? 2019 in America, I'm working to pay for health care. I don't know if I am ever going to be passionate enough or eloquent enough to go back to the State House and explain to people what that means really, to be working to survive, to buy your medicines, to get to the doctor's appointments, to make these heart-wrenching choices, but I promise I'm going to work really, really, really hard at getting there. And we're going to need you to continue to back us up in this. Because if you're looking at the national dialogue right now, at these crazy presidential debates, where people start talking about an issue that I think in this area we understand, what we realize is that other people don't get it. They don't get what single payer means. They don't get what Medicare for all means. They have these crazy ideas that it's socialism. Maybe. But we are going to need to have a grassroots effort to continue on that fight. And we're going to need to have more real progressives in office. And I always struggle with what that really means, because sometimes we think, oh, it's just policies, right? It's just checking the box. Yes, I support single payer. Yes, I support 100% renewable. Yes, I support encouraging voting and voting rights. But it's more than that. It's a desire to really dig into your community, to move from the bottom up, to get everybody involved, and to not buy in to this hierarchical structure that got us into this mess in the first place. And it's not only the presidential election, it's every single election. It's your governor's council. Because let's talk about criminal justice reform, guys. Governor's council is huge. We aren't paroling anybody in this state, and that's the fault of the Governor's Council, who selects our parole board. We need to be involved in a granular level in every single race, and we need progressives to do it, so I need you all today to learn how to multiply yourselves, and to stay involved, and to stay committed, and to stay true to when you hear people in your community talking about the suffering that they are experiencing, to react in real, true, compassionate, and human ways, because that's what progressives really are. Thank you for having me here today, and I look forward to being back here next year.
Thank you, Lindsay. And I did not mean to slight Joe Comerford, who I have known since Tim Carpenter introduced me to her 15 years ago. But Joe, since I've known her with a National Priorities Project, to move on to now in the State House, I've never been prouder to call her somebody a friend, Joe Comerford.
Russell, we've known each other a very, very long time. There's nothing that could ever happen except for positive movement building. I'm delighted to be here. It feels like coming home to be with PDA. I love these picnics in part because I get to see so many old friends and colleagues, and in part because it's a moment where we come together and we say the name Tim Carpenter. And who was, I see a lot of nods, right? Presente, Tim Carpenter, who was, I know for many of us, a beacon, a friend, a colleague, an engine, someone who understood the power of the grassroots to make government work. Tim knew that government, folks like me, folks like the amazing colleagues I have here, we go to work every day. We want to do the best thing possible for our constituents, for our districts, but it's people in the grassroots, it's organizations and entities like PDA that make us move. So it's of course not surprising to me that when Jamie Eldridge and I were catching up, that he of course had a relationship with PDA and Tim Carpenter, and it's not surprising that all of you have that kind of same fire, that same beacon inside of you that is going to lead you on to fight every day. So my colleagues, Lindsay and Mindy, have laid this up extraordinarily well. Let me just pile on with a couple of other things while I get to speak with you today. First of all, it's really a great treat for me to have Jamie Eldridge here. If you heard me campaign, I said at many, many House parties, send me to the Senate so I can fight with Jamie Eldridge and Sonia Chang-Diaz. And so now I get to do just that. Jamie's been extraordinarily generous, as have my incredible House colleagues. Mindy Domb, thank you for that shout out. I'm sweating and blushing at the same time. So in addition to what Mindy and Lindsay have already talked about in there, I won't repeat what they said. These are the issues that are going to be with us. I just want to raise up a couple of things that actually Jamie and I talked about a little bit, and I'm guessing you're going to want to say some of this, so I'm going to save some of it. So I think there are going to be 4 major fights for us, in addition to the number of bills that we want to get passed, like the ones that Mindy talked about. And this is going to be a particularly critical piece of time, right, in the legislature, because we're going to push all the way through till the end of November, and then this tricky thing called an election year is going to pop up, and it's going to make it somewhat difficult to make as much traction. So I think that this is extraordinarily important these next months, and PDA's work is going to be even more important in these next months. So I agree with Rep. Sabadosa that healthcare has got to be front burner. There will be a healthcare bill. I think all of us who care about single payer are going to try to figure out the ways in which the pieces of that healthcare bill advance the single payer need that we want in this Commonwealth, that particularly us in Western Massachusetts have been grinding forward and charging forward with. We're going to talk about public education. It's a generational opportunity in the legislature to talk about public education, and we have to see that as a progressive civil rights issue. We have been underfunding it, and we're going to need progressives like PDA to really be powerful, holding lawmakers like me accountable for nailing the kind of education justice that we know we need. We have not in the legislature taken up education reform since 1993, right? The world has changed since 1993 considerably, and many people around us, I think, have made a lot of jokes about what today is like compared to 1993, right? That's how long it's been since we've evaluated things like special ed, things like healthcare costs, things like English language learners, things like what the foundation budget means for our schools. And so what that's caused in small communities is a real crisis. And so just the other day, I was on the phone with Amherst and Northampton school committee members and our colleague Jason Lewis, talking about, for example, the impact of charter schools and the lack of real mitigation funding for charter schools. And the legislature continues to underfund that at such a critical deficit that it's causing real upheaval here in, for example, the Amherst Regional School District. Also, regional school transportation has never been fully funded. And I won't go down the litany because it would all give us a little agita after this meal. But that's the kind of stuff we're going to talk about. So healthcare, education, we've got to talk about the climate crisis. Oh my God, now Jim McGovern has been leading this. And thanks to Jim McGovern, we have a special counsel on the environment at the federal level. Our colleagues are talking about it, but we need a comprehensive solution. That's why I'm really excited that DOER is going to come out and talk about the SMART program, which is one piece of this puzzle, but we need monumental, and we actually thank you for mentioning Jen Benson, that's another piece of this. We need transformational change at the state level. This is a moment where the state has to step up, state and municipalities, because we wish we had everybody in there like Jim McGovern. We don't in Washington. And so we have to do our part here. And the state has to do it. And we know what to do. We know the pieces around interconnectivity and incentivizing solar on the built environment. We could go on and on. We know what to do. We must develop the political and social will to get that done. And then I think the fourth thing that I really do believe we have to talk about is the kind of immigration reform work and immigrant justice work that we have to get done in the courts. And that's the driver's license bill that Mindy talked about. It's the Safe Communities Act that Jamie has led in the legislature. That this is a piece of work that we can't turn our back on. So the Supreme Court can make these ill-gotten decisions, but here in Massachusetts we can say no to a Muslim registry. Here in Massachusetts, we can decouple our police from ICE. We can do these things. Municipalities have done them. We must do them here in the Commonwealth in order to have the Commonwealth be a kind of place of justice that we want it to be. So I'll stop there and just say a couple things. One is, I do have a website, senatorjoecomerford.org. It's strange to have your name on a URL, but there you have it, I have one. It's got a lot of resources about how to engage at the state level. I'll also be doing office hours, and they're starting to roll out. I'm going to do a library tour because librarians, I'm telling you, are the fiercest people on earth. So I'm going to do my open houses at libraries all throughout the fall, and I'm excited. I'd be excited if PDA wanted to partner in any of them. And also, as Senate Chair of Public Health, I'm doing a series of oversight hearings. So the first one is on the interconnection of food security and nutrition in public health, because we often don't look at food security as a public health issue, and yet it is, of course. The next one's going to be on the intersection of rural health care and public health. They're both going to be in Greenfield. And then I'm going to do one at the intersection of the environment and public health. I'm looking at you, Stephen Franz, and others who care about this. And so I welcome your partnership here as we really take on in the legislature this opportunity to see the interconnectivity in these issues, especially at this high stakes moment. So I love PDA, and it's really good to be with you. Thank you.
When I first got involved with PDA, one of the names I heard over and over and over was Jamie Eldridge. And when I look at bills in the state legislature that I really am glad to see they've been filed, I see they've been filed by Senator Jamie Eldridge. So, Jamie, it's a pleasure to have you here again.
Thank you so much, Russell, and thank you once again for inviting me out here. And as I think a lot of you here know, is that I've come pretty much every year for the past 11 years. I wasn't here last year because I had a competitive race, but I've come here for the past 11 years because when I ran for United States Congress in 2007, Progressive Democrats of America was the first organization in the state, really in the nation, to endorse me, and that really meant so much to me. And though I came up short, just a few months later, my senator announced her retirement, and I was able to run for the Senate and really been advocating for the kinds of legislation that PDA is fighting for at the national level, and that Congressman McGovern is leading the fight on at the state level. So I really want to appreciate your strong early support. Being the fourth legislator speaking, I feel like there's not too much to add on the policy front, other than to say, you know, Western Mass has always been extremely well represented from a sort of forward-thinking, progressive perspective. You are so represented by Joe Comerford, by Mindy Domb, by Lindsay Sabadosa, and I hope you realize that the first-year class, both House and Senate, is really leading the fight on so many issues and really having an impact in Beacon Hill. So I just want to thank the three of you for your incredible leadership in 6 or 7 months of your first term. It was mentioned that Joe and myself and Lindsay and Representative Tammy Gouveia, we are the co-chairs of the Medicare for All caucus. So that's, I think perhaps, Lindsay can correct me if I'm wrong, the first Medicare for All caucus in the country for a legislature?
That would be accurate.
Yes, okay.
Yay.
I think what that speaks to, and Lindsay already talked a little bit about to it, is you know, we're expecting some sort of healthcare cost control bill this session, and Joe talked a little bit about what are the opportunities in that. But at the end of the day, this really is about a grassroots movement to make healthcare right, and that is where PDA really comes in. Organizations like Mass Care, and I know the new director of Mass Care, Rebecca Wood, is here. Rebecca, where's Rebecca? So Rebecca, congratulations. We haven't even had a chance to meet, but congratulations. So glad you're here. And I would just add that on the climate change front, the House has passed a very strong Greenworks bill around climate resiliency. Now we're looking to see what the Senate's going to do. The Senate did pass a very bold climate change bill last session. It did not become law, so I'm hoping that we can be very aggressive in that front. I know that Joe Comerford has filed a bill around net zero energy code for all homes and buildings and all communities across Massachusetts. That's exactly the kind of new legislation that we need and new ideas if we're serious about making sure that Massachusetts is the lead in the nation on taking on climate change. And the truth is, we're kind of falling behind a little bit. New York State has passed a strong law. Maine has passed a strong law. So we're actually falling behind. We're no longer really number one on combating climate change. So we really need to take action, especially this week when you see the increasing number of fires going on in the Amazon and all the protests around it. We need to make sure that Massachusetts is the lead. The last thing I want to mention, which hasn't been mentioned, is that, and it applies both to education but also to public transportation, is on revenue. And if we are serious about a public transportation and transportation system that fits all the needs of 351 communities, including Western Mass, we need to raise revenue this fall. We need to make sure it's progressive revenue. So that's something that I'm hoping the House and Senate can take up this fall if we're really serious about combating the transportation crisis we have in Massachusetts. And the last thing I would say, and it was mentioned, is on the immigration front. I mean, we're in Massachusetts. We have an overwhelmingly Democratic legislature. We should be passing the driver's license bill for undocumented immigrants that Mindy Domb mentioned. We should be passing the Safe Communities Act bill that I'm proud to file. We should be passing in-state tuition for the children of undocumented immigrants in Massachusetts. Your organization and other organizations that may be also represented here really apply that pressure, hold the legislature accountable, because if Massachusetts can't stand for progressive value and supporting among the most vulnerable people right now in the country, then what are other states going to do? So let's make sure that immigration justice remains in the forefront of the legislature. Thank you so much for having me. It's a real honor to come out here each year, and thanks for all your years of support.
Thanks, Jamie. I was saying earlier what a difference a year makes. A year ago, we were here worrying about the 2018 election in the House. Jim McGovern, dear friend Jim McGovern, made this appeal to all of us to get active and to make sure that change took place. Well, the Democrats took over the House. Good friend Jim McGovern became chairman of the Rules Committee. Well, on some levels things look bleak. On other levels things look like there's a bright new day of sunshine coming. So just want to bring up Jim McGovern to talk a little bit about what's going on in Washington, D.C.
Well, thank you very much. And let me just say that I'm blessed that I serve with such incredible people in government, and I want to associate myself with the remarks of everybody. I agree with everything they've said. I also want to say thank you to all of you here and PDA in general. I think of Tim Carpenter while I'm listening to all these speeches. I also remembering Francis Crowe, and I think the one thing that we all should do if we want to honor their legacy is to work harder for peace and for justice and for fairness and for equity and for all the good things that they stood for. And that's what when I think of PDA, that's what I think about. Let me say that I am, I don't even know where to begin to tell you what's happening in Washington. But let me just say this, and I've said, all my life, I have always respected the office of president. And even when there were people in that office that I strongly and passionately disagreed with, I still felt a respect for the individual who was there in that office. I don't feel that way now. I feel ashamed. I feel embarrassed. I feel frightened. This man is not fit to be president of the United States. And on top of all of that, he has acted in a way that by any measure is criminality. And he does not deserve to remain there. And that is why I believe he should be impeached. And I support the formal impeachment inquiry. I mean, and I think, there are moments when we have to stop trying to forecast, where public opinion is going to be next week or the week after, or the week after. Sometimes you're just going to do what you think is right. And it's not only with regard to that, it's with regard to a whole range of issues that you've heard my colleagues talk about here today. Thanks to you, my wife said, "Where are you going?" I said, "I'm going to a picnic." She said, "With who?" I said, "With a bunch of troublemakers." And all good troublemakers, right? And the deal is that everybody stepped up, and it made a difference. We moved the needle forward in the last election. Democratic control of the House means a lot of different things. As was mentioned, I get to be chairman of the Rules Committee, and the reason why that is important is because we are allowing there to be debates on issues that have, for almost the last decade, been prevented from coming to the floor. So we have debated issues our involvement in Afghanistan, and we have brought climate change bills to the floor. We have debated gun control legislation. We passed a bill to provide universal background checks and to close other loopholes, and we need to do more of that. As chair of the Rules Committee, I got to, at the behest of everybody here, because I said that if I became chair, we would do this. We held the first ever Medicare for All hearing in the United States House or Senate. And I have to tell you that even the critics of the Medicare for All proposal were surprised at how good the hearing was. I was a little bit surprised myself how good it was. But one of the witnesses we had was this guy named Artie Barkin. I don't know how many of you know who he is. Artie is battling with ALS, and he had heard that we were doing this hearing. He lives in Florida. He lives in California, and he called the Speaker of the House and said, "Do you think that Mr. McGovern would let me testify at the hearing?" And she said, "I see no reason why not." She called me, and I said, "Absolutely, would we be honored to?" But his physical condition has so deteriorated that I didn't think it was possible for him to fly all the way across to Washington to be able to testify. And I didn't know how long he could testify. Well, he came, and he no longer has use of his voice. He speaks through this with a synthetic voice. He can look at the computer, and his words are basically replayed synthetically. And he testified for 6.5 hours. And one of the things he said, and this is the case, I think, when we talk about Medicare for All that needs to be made, is that, more and more people are getting health insurance in this country, and that is a good thing. But quite frankly, people are getting health insurance that's still not adequate, and people are paying too much for their health insurance, and there's still people who do not have health insurance in this country. And he said, I have great health insurance. He said, but I have to spend hours every week on the phone with the insurance company fighting with them to cover what they should be covering anyway. He said, so I'm spending hours a week fighting with insurance companies when I only have a few months to live, and I should be spending that with my children. And he said, and look, my out-of-pocket expenses, even with this great insurance, is about $8,000 or $9,000 a month. I think it was a week given his care. And he said, look, I have a big following. I have a GoFundMe page. I have over 110,000 followers. So I've been helped, and I've been blessed by that. But not everybody has 110,000 followers, right? And you shouldn't have to have a GoFundMe page to get your health care paid for and to make sure you get what you need. So look, the needle is moving. And we're going to have to get through some of the falsehoods that are being uttered about Medicare for All. This whole argument, are your taxes going to be raised? Well, the deal is this. You will pay a little bit more, but you will not have to pay for insurance. And you will not have to pay out-of-pocket expenses, all these crazy deductibles. And you will end up paying less and getting much more for your health care. So we're going to move forward on that. The issue of the climate crisis. I mean, every day, this White House comes up with another way to exacerbate the problem. Just a few days ago, they wanted to overturn the Obama administration's regulations on methane gas going into the atmosphere. And we're gonna fight him on that. We'll go to court, we'll fight him in Congress, and it'll be, but the fact that we are spending our time doing that rather than moving forward and actually doing something to solve this problem, which is still solvable, but in a very short time it will not be. So that's why the next elections are so incredibly important. I was reminded about the other part of protecting our climate is protecting our forests. We were talking about what's happening in Wendell right now. You know, we have to protect our forests. These trees are essential, to protecting this planet. And whether it's in Wendell or whether it's in the Amazon, I mean, we need to protect these forests, and we need to support those here locally who are having the guts to stand up to some powerful special interests that want to have it a different way. But we need to deal with that issue. The issue of guns, same thing. I mean, we live in a country with an unconscionable high rate of gun violence. We live in a country where massacres happen on a regular basis. I mean, think about it. I mean, I now worry about my kids when they go to school. I worry about my kids if they go to a movie. I worry about my kids if they go to a concert. You have to worry about your kids or anybody if they go to church nowadays, because we have had massacres occur everywhere. And this man in the White House is so wholly owned by the National Rifle Association and the gun lobby, it is a national disgrace. But not only that, his rhetoric, his racism, and his bigotry, and his hatred have created a climate where you saw what happened in El Paso, where this shooter went and decided he agrees with the president on immigration and wanted to rid the community of all, quote, immigrants and Mexicans. I mean, it is horrifying what is happening in this country right now. And I remind people, what's going to be on the ballot in 2020 is not just the character of this president. It's going to be our character. It's going to be who we are. And we all say, this is not who we are. After Charlottesville, this is not who we are. All this. Well, you know what? If this guy gets reelected, and if he maintain a Senate with Mitch McConnell as the majority leader, well, that says a lot about the character of this country. Let me just say one thing about immigration. I've been to the border twice in the last 2 months. Some of you may have followed me on Twitter, but I went into one of the holding cells, and I actually videotaped it. So you can't videotape it. I said, thank you very much, and I videotaped it. And the reason why I videotaped it is because if I said to you or to anybody else what I saw, there would be many who would not believe what I saw. So, I mean, pictures and videos are worth, a million words in this case. And we went into one holding cell, which is supposed to be a place where detainees are held for 48 hours. And there were multiple cells. Probably each cell could maybe fit 25 or 30 people, maybe. There were like 60, 70, 80 people in each of these cells. And I asked the people who were behind the wall, I said, how long have you been here? Since we were told they were only supposed to be there for 2 days. 30 days, 60 days. And I asked, are you allowed to take a shower? And they said, no. And the guy who was touring us around said, well, Congress needs to give us more money. I said, wait a minute. Taking a shower, this is not about money here, because they're here, and I see the showers over there. I mean, this is not about money, it's about cruelty. You separating children from their parents is not about money, it's about cruelty. And some of the people working there, they had masks on because they knew, they were afraid of getting a disease because they knew these people were getting the help and the treatment that they needed. And I spent some time in Central America. I took the Speaker of the House with me. We went to El Salvador, Honduras, and Guatemala. And I got to tell you, you want to know why? If we want to deal with the migration problem at the border, you got to realize you got to deal with what's happening in these countries. Right. And here's the one thing we all need to keep in mind. For some of you who are as old as me, and you remember back in the 1980s, and even before that, U.S. involvement and intervention in Central America has been quite extensive over the last decades, and it hasn't been very good. I mean, we have overthrown governments. We have supported dictatorships. We have supported militaries and security forces that raped and murdered nuns, priests, archbishops, student leaders, union leaders, I mean, you know, doctors, nurses, you name it. We deported gang members back to these countries, basically to, you know, without providing any assistance for these countries to deal with it. And then and we supported all these wars that went on during the 1980s. When the wars ended, we walked away. We walked away. We left these countries in shambles. So other than deporting gang members, I mean, we're not doing very much of anything good. And even the little we were doing that was good, we're not doing anymore. Even an example, I went to Guatemala, went to a shelter for children who have been trafficked, and heard these stories, and you know, and there was some hope, you know, that there's a place for some of these kids that they may be able to get back their lives. And we asked, you know, what are the challenges you face? They said, well, we're running out of money. And I said, well, doesn't USAID support you? And they said, well, they did, but President Trump has frozen all aid to these countries. So the little good that we were doing, we're not doing anymore. I helped form an initiative in El Salvador based on a lot of conversations with Salvadorans who were in Massachusetts and all across the country, who would come up to me and say, you know, I lost my mother or my father or my brother or my sister were disappeared during the war. I never knew what happened to them. I want to find them. I want to find where they were buried. I want to recover their bones. I want to give them a proper burial. This is closure for our family. We actually got this program going, you know, and we had some modest funding to help a forensics unit go out and identify the remains. USAID was supporting that, no longer supporting it, nothing. So we're not only not helping, we are making a bad situation worse. And so look, on all these issues, I mean, the stakes have never, ever been higher. And I think we have an opportunity in 2020 to not just stop the hemorrhaging, but to actually make progress, to actually move the ball forward much more dramatically. And one of the things that I really appreciate about PDA, and I think I speak for all my colleagues here when I say this, is that you understand that politics is more than just about winning elections. And winning, you gotta win, right? That's important to win. But more importantly, politics is about conviction. I mean, it's about principle. It's about values. And, you know, and if you don't care about those things, if you don't care about principle, conviction, and you know, values, then this is all a waste of time, right? I mean, we have to. I mean, we're here because we care deeply about this country. We're here because we love this country, and we want to make it better. And so I just close by saying to everybody here, I can't ever thank you enough for all that you have done for me, and I also want to thank you for constantly reminding me that we're not doing enough, right? And I think there's more that we need to do, and we just can't give up. This is a time when failure is not an option. And I got two kids, and both of them now in college. I just dropped my daughter off at UMass Amherst yesterday. Right now. And you know, and I want them to have a future that's bright and that's hopeful and that's compassionate. And they deserve that. And so I'm happy to be here, and I'm happy to be with so many friends and who have been involved in so many causes. And I know if Tim Carpenter is watching, he's now telling me you've spoken long enough. Done. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Jim. It's always a pleasure to have you back in our annual picnic. One of the things that we discovered at the annual picnic is when candidates come here and speak, they have a really good shot at winning their election. So we have a candidate who's running for Congress in the 1st Congressional District, Mayor Alex Morse. So we're going to give him the microphone and get a chance to meet him.
Thank you, Russell, and I don't know how I'm going to follow Congressman McGovern, but thank you for being here, and thank you for your leadership, and how lucky for those of you that live in the 2nd Congressional District here in Massachusetts. My name is Alex Morse. I know many of you from over the years and just from over the last several weeks, but I was elected mayor back in 2011 in the city of Holyoke at the age of 22. I was born and raised in Holyoke, and I'm sure many of you are somewhat familiar with the city, and I grew up in the backdrop of people had just kind of quietly given up on our city. We were once the paper capital of the world, and over years with globalization, deindustrialization, those jobs left the city, high crime, white flight out of the community, poor outcomes in the public schools, and growing up in that city and still having the experience that I did, not giving up on the city of Holyoke, knowing that it can be a place that provides everyone opportunities, not just people that look like me. And I was fortunate enough to grow up, go through the public schools, and become the first in my family to go on to college. And it was an easy choice for me whether or not I wanted to go to grad school or move to a big city. And I quickly decided I want to come back to my hometown, come back to Holyoke, to make sure that it was a place where everyone felt welcome and everyone could do well. And I ran because there were people and places and neighborhoods, low-income communities, the Latino community in particular, that have historically felt left behind and forgotten about and lost faith that local government could be a force for good in their lives. And when we look at the work that we've done together over the last 8 years, many things that people said just weren't possible. I took office and only 49% of our young people were graduating from high school. Today the number is over 72%. Crime over the last 8 years has gone down 40%. Unemployment rate was over 13% when I took office. It's under 5% today. But more than any specific project, any particular building, infrastructure project, data point, the thing I'm most proud of over the last 8 years is the way in which we've opened up the doors of City Hall to people that have historically felt that that building, their mayor, wasn't looking out for them. And when you think about government and who you stand for, not just when you're governing, but also when you're campaigning, because I think your campaign is oftentimes a reflection of your values and how you will govern. And we reached out to folks that had never seen a candidate for office, knock on their door, ask them what they thought the future of our city should be, and to knock on doors to include people, because oftentimes traditional elected officials, they only talk to what they call super voters, the people that they know show up in every single election. And progressives oftentimes win because they expand the universe. They talk to people that haven't had a door knock, haven't had someone in their living room or their kitchen. And those are the issues in Holyoke. And when I think about why I decided to run for Congress here in Western Mass in the 1st Congressional District, they're very similar to the reasons I announced my campaign for mayor back in 2011 at the age of 22. That there are people and places, there are cities and towns, there are urban areas and rural areas that are feeling forgotten about, feeling left behind, and have lost faith that federal government can be a force for good in their life. And I've been so honored and privileged just over the last 5 weeks to meet so many of you, to hear so many stories about the need for progressive leadership in Washington. And I've been so grateful to see the work of our state legislators and this narrative that you have to be in Washington for 20 or 30 years to have influence, to set the agenda. I think that's been proven wrong by, in particular, the members of the squad, members of Congress that have only been there 8 months, that have held this president accountable in a way that members of Congress that have been there for 20 or 30 years haven't. And so I've heard often just over the last 5 weeks that you're running against another Democrat that has a lot of power and a lot of seniority. And our fundamental question is, who is that power being used for? What use is having 30 years experience and power if you're going to be one of only a few Democrats to not call for impeachment? What use is having that power if you're not going to support a healthcare system that believes that healthcare is a human right and that we need to have a Medicare for all system in this country? What's the point of having that power if you're going to be the only one of the 9 Democrats representing us in Massachusetts if you can't sign on to the Green New Deal and see climate as a crisis that it is for our communities, particularly low-income communities and communities of color in Springfield and Holyoke? And so for us, this isn't about power, it's about who we're using and exercising that power to and power for. And this campaign is not going to be easy. Over the next 13 months, we want to build relationships and in partnership with communities all across every one of the 87 cities and towns, and show that this campaign is about everyday people. Because when you think about the challenges and struggles that people have here in Western Mass, to put food on the table, to find health care, and even when they have health care, being underinsured, a struggle for a family member to find a detox bed or a treatment facility for themselves. We see schools and hospitals closing in the rural parts of our district, we would never know that we have one of the most powerful Democrats in Congress representing us in Western Mass. And when I think about what I heard today from the other members of government, elected officials here, is it matters who's in office. We see Massachusetts as a place, a beacon of hope and progressive politics. And when you think about, and we have a super majority of Democrats in the House and Senate, and we still haven't been able to get in-state tuition for undocumented immigrants. We still haven't been able to get driver's licenses for undocumented immigrants. We still haven't been able to get fully funding our public schools. I mean, Holyoke would see upwards of an additional $20 million a year. And then we're criticized for having poor performance in our public schools when we've been chronically underfunded for years. But then you elect new folks in Western Mass so that Jamie doesn't have to be the only strong progressive at the State House, and the conversation changes. And so it's not just about having a Democrat in power or a Democrat in the Senate or a Democrat in the White House. What's the point of having Democrats in those positions if we're not going to make transformative change in people's lives? And this is what this campaign is about. It's not about running against another Democrat or running against someone with power. It's about bringing every single person, no matter what they look like, what neighborhood they're from, what language they speak, or their background. It's making sure that their stories and their struggles are heard in Washington. And when I take a vote or make a decision, people never have to wonder who I'm standing up for or making a decision for. And we're very proud of the fact that I am not taking a single dime of corporate PAC money. This campaign is powered by people. I also want to thank Congressman McGovern for swearing off corporate PAC money as well. It's important, the influence of money in politics in our system is a fundamental root. And so I'm excited to get to know those of you who I haven't yet met. And I do want to take a moment to acknowledge and thank Tahira Amatul Wadud for running for Congress. And I really want to thank Tahira because she woke a lot of people up in the first district when it comes to issues. And I know that my campaign wouldn't be possible without the conversations in the campaign that you ran back in 2018. So thank you for your leadership and your values as well. And so with that, I just want to thank Russell and the Progressive Democrats of America for inviting me to be here today. It was great to meet with you and your board a couple of months ago. Thank you as well for having a Medicare for All event in Holyoke a couple of weeks ago. And thank you, Rebecca, for sharing your story a couple of weeks ago as well, and for testifying before the Ways and Means Committee about the importance of having a single-payer system. And I'm excited to bring a progressive voice to represent all of Western Mass, to work alongside other members of Congress that are doing everything they can to hold this president accountable, to stand up for everyday people, not just the wealthy and the well-connected. Thank you and have a great afternoon.
Thank you, Alex. When Tim Carpenter and others founded PDA back, 15 years ago, the whole idea was what we call the inside-outside strategy, which means we work inside the House of Congress with members of Congress like Jim, Progressive Caucus and others, but also with outside groups. So you used to say in the suites and in the streets. One of the groups that we're proud to work with is Voter Choice America. We got Jesse Navarro to talk a little bit about that.
So it's always great to go after all the elected officials who've been doing this a lot longer than me. So my name is Jesse Noviello. I'm one of the Western Mass organizers for Voter Choice Massachusetts. I cover Franklin and Berkshire counties. Voter Choice Massachusetts is working on an issue called ranked choice voting. I imagine most of you are familiar with it, but I'll do a brief explanation right now. Basically, it's what it sounds like. You get to rank all the candidates running, and then if your first choice can't win, your vote gets moved to your second choice. And I actually got involved with this issue last year when I worked on Jared Golden's campaign in the Maine 2nd, which was Maine is the first state to use ranked choice voting for federal elections. And we saw there ranked choice voting working exactly as intended. There were several independents who ran who could have spoiled the election without ranked choice voting. And in the first round, the Republican incumbent had more votes, but not a majority. And because Jared was able to win more of those second choice votes of the independents, he is now a member of the U.S. House of Representatives. So here in Massachusetts, well, we do have bills in the legislature, and we are continuing to work with our allies in the legislature to get those passed this session. We are also preparing for a 2020 ballot initiative. We are hoping, we've submitted the language, and we're hoping to get the actual signature sheets in the coming weeks. Probably the 9th of September, and that's the last day is the 18th of September. And we, especially here in Western Mass, are looking for help from activists and organizers like yourself with collecting those signatures. As many of you probably know from working on ballot initiatives in the past, it is quite a heavy lift to get on the 2020 ballot, but we're very confident we can do it. So I will be hanging around for the rest of the afternoons. If you're interested at all in helping out with collecting signatures, or if you're like, oh, I don't actually know what ranked choice voting is, could you explain it in more detail, I can do that as well. Either one, feel free and talk to me, because I would love to get people signed up to help us collect signatures this fall. Yeah, so we do have a website, voterchoicema.org, and we'll eventually have a separate website just for the ballot committee as well, but that is not up yet, but will be shortly.
Thank you, Jesse. One of the other groups that we've worked with closely for years and years and years is Mass Care, and we're delighted to have Rebecca with us. And her assistant.
Wow, that was quite the welcome. Thank you. Thank you guys so much for inviting me and Charlie and all that it brings. We just moved here to Massachusetts from Charlottesville, Virginia in May. Thank you. And I don't know how many of you know our story, but prior to 2017, I had no interest in politics. I was actually a park ranger. So then when the election happened and the ACA came under attack, I decided it was time to fight. Charlie was born at 26 weeks gestation, and her birth was a pre-existing condition. And she had been through so much to get to where she is. There was PT, OT, speech, music therapy, 8 specialists, 3 surgeries, and she was in the NICU for 3 months. All of that drained us emotionally and financially, and we had to make choices that were not all that great. It started when I had to decide between my asthma medication and paying the co-pays for her care. Then it continued on. Charlie's speech started emerging when she was about 3.5 years old, and we didn't expect that to actually happen. We kind of signed back and forth because that's how she learned to talk before that. But so when it happened, she had a therapy co-payment due, and I had needed a root canal and a crown, and I decided to pay her therapy co-pay because I did not want to miss a window of opportunity, and thought I'll pay for the crown next pay period and just take care of her first. Well, during that pay period, I got an infection that spread through my mouth and jaw. And I had to go to the emergency room because the swelling cut off my airway. And so I received IV antibiotics and was discharged, and they said, go to the dentist, have your mouth cleaned up, you should be okay now. So I went to the dentist, and I had to have it done under general anesthesia because that is what I could afford. The oral surgeon was too much. And I thought I was going to have a few teeth pulled. But after 6.5 hours later, I had lost all of my teeth and parts of my jaw. And and yeah. And at the time, I told myself that was the price of a miracle. That is what I said I would trade for her survival back in the NICU when we weren't sure she was going to make it. So anyhow, when we started fighting for the ACA on Capitol Hill, I saw how things worked. I saw, we also had to fight for Medicaid as well while we were up there. And I realized, no, it was too much. It shouldn't have cost us our future. It shouldn't have cost us our home ownership. It shouldn't have cost me my mouth. It was ridiculous. And so after we won the ACA fight, I had this feeling of emptiness. And my friend Ben asked me, he said, what do you need to make that better? And I said, I don't know, let me think about it. 3 days later, I texted him and said, I want Medicare for all. And so, so I got in on the fight, and I'm not going away. And also, I must say, some of you mentioned how a lot of the progressive things that you've worked on in Massachusetts, Charlie benefits from the free breakfast at school. And as a single mom, that is a huge deal. She benefits from another one of your initiatives. So let's go get Medicare for all. Oh, and I should talk about MassCare. So I'm the new community organizer for MassCare. We will be working on the state and national level. Russell and Larry right now are working to organize a phone action to kind of push Neil to get on the House bill. And I'm beginning to work in the state, having just moved to Massachusetts. It's a very steep learning curve, but I love it. It's beautiful up here and everybody has been wonderful. So thank you so much. If you want to talk more, we've finally eaten. So we're much more organized. So thank you so much for having us.
As usual, it's hard to follow Rebecca, sharing your story. Every year when we have this event, I tell people, no, it's not a fundraiser. And for years, Arkie Markham, who died 2 years ago, would show up with her checkbook and I'd say, Arkie, it's not a fundraiser. And she said, yes, but how much can I give you? So this is not a fundraiser, but we do have expenses for renting this place and the food. So any donations, Pat's going to go around with an envelope will be thankfully received. Rebecca did mention our activity to try to help Congressman Neal see the light on single payer. The single payer bill, Pramila Jayapal's bill has 6 of the 9 members of Congress in Massachusetts have signed on. Of course, Jim McGovern without any question. The 3 that have not are Congressman Keating, Congressman Lynch, and Congressman Neal. So we had an event on last Sunday, or I guess a week and a half ago, in Holyoke to talk about things we can do to pressure Congressman Neal. There's a postcard over on the table which I sent to Congressman Neal, and other people are most welcome to take it and send him as well. But Larry's going to come up and talk a little bit about what some of the other groups have done to help Congressman Kennedy sign on to the bill as well, and we're going to try to do that with Congressman Neal. So, Larry?
I think what we all recognize right now is that the adoption of Medicare for all, either at the state level or at the federal level, is going to be done an inch at a time. So there's a couple of things that I'd like to highlight in just a minute or two. Number one, education of the public and getting the public behind all of us who already support Medicare for all is absolutely essential. Kelly Johnston, standing right back in the dark t-shirt, has been organizing showings of Fix-It, healthcare at the tipping point. And if you haven't seen it, I really recommend that you go on to the PDA website, because on the calendar will be a list of all of the showings of Fix-It. The value of that film, if you haven't seen it, it's less than an hour long, but it covers a lot of ground, both in terms of deficiencies in the current healthcare financing system, as well as what Medicare for All can offer. So what we've learned from hosting a number of these Fix-It showings, which oftentimes are 25 to 45 people at a time, is that people are very uncomfortable with the concept of Medicare for all, often thinking about it in terms of the takeover of the entire healthcare system. So one of the things that Fix-It does is talks about the financing of healthcare. If you're not familiar with how Medicare for all might be financed, on the table there's a half sheet, a yellow half sheet, and on it is a website citation for a report on financing of Medicare for all. It's a free download. It was a major research project done by 5 economists from the University of Massachusetts. It was released in November of last year. It'll take you months to dig through, but I'm telling you, it's one of the best research projects I've ever read. And we're going to try and organize that report in bite-sized chunks for the public. But it gives you, I think, all of the research that you ever will need about how to finance Medicare for all. And it talks about how it influences down to the level of a family of 4 making under $40,000, a family of 4 earning more than $40,000. So it gets down to almost a neighborhood level. If you haven't read it, and I suspect many have not yet, I really encourage you to sign on and take a look at that, because those are the kinds of questions we found that when we show Fix-It. It's the kind of questions that the audience frequently asks, and if we're going to convince the people by November 2020 to sign on to Medicare for all, we've got to be able to convince them it makes sense. So I would encourage you to again, get a look at that report, number 1. Number 2, take a look at the PDA website so you can see when the showings of Fix-It are going to happen. Secondly, the August 18th roundtable that we did. The PDA is in coalition with National Nurses United. They've rolled out a $6 million national campaign to develop support for Medicare for all. On August the 18th, we joined in a coalition with not only NNU, but Healthcare Now, Franklin County Continuing Political Revolution, and Mass Care. And that was a short couple of hours in the afternoon. We had about 45 to 50 people showed up. We had individuals who are living with the current healthcare financing situation, including Rebecca, talk about their personal stories. Then we had Judith Atkins from FCCPR talk about the influence of the current financing system on small hill towns, small communities. And then we had Mayor Morse talk about the impact on large cities. So we've got enough information at this point to be able to talk to the public, but we need you to be involved with talking to the public. We also, that's sort of dealing with the current situation with the public, but we also need to make sure that our Representative Neal knows that he cannot overlook the support for MFA that exists in CD1. And what grew out of the August 18th roundtable was a strategy for doing direct telephone calls to his office by the public. And if you're interested in being part of this, which essentially means showing up in front of supermarkets or other places where people gather, having his Washington office telephone number already into your cell phone, and asking people at that moment to call Representative Neal's office and say, I support Medicare for all, and I think you should also. It's a not very complicated thing. It's not any more complicated than signing the self-addressed postcards that are over there on the table. But what we wanted to do is to make sure he stays aware of the fact we support Medicare for all. Whatever reasons he has for not supporting it now are not sufficient in our view. So I encourage you, if you're at all interested in being part of this, we'll probably be doing this over the next 2 weeks. Come and talk to me. I'll get your contact information. I'll get you signed up. The other thing to know is between now and November 2020, we're all going to be, we all are going to be more busy than we want to be. But what I'm suggesting is, if you want to be involved in Medicare for all, if you want to be involved in the public education process that we're involved in, just keep your eye on the PDA website, and you'll find listings for activities that you can be part of. Thank you.
it's the PDA Mass website where this is all listed. Before we have our last speaker, I just want to say that PDA meets the second Monday of the month in Northampton at 241, I think it's called, Potpourri Mall, thank you. On the north side, this is the door to come in. It's at 7 o'clock, the second Monday of the month. We'd love to have any and all of you join us. There's one more person on my list, Richard Carver? Sorry if I slaughtered your name.
Hey, thank you very much. Thank you for being here. Thank you for hanging in with this litany of speech, which is all great. I want to give a special thank to Congressman McGovern for calling it what it is, climate crisis. Notice that we've moved on. We're no longer calling it climate change. We're calling it an emergency, a crisis, climate devastation, whatever fits your fancy. I'm here representing 350 Central Massachusetts, the Sunrise Movement, and Extinction Rebellion, to talk about #climate strike. Okay, put that one in your memory. What I'm hoping that you're going to do is go home tonight. You're going to put into your search engine #climate strike and your city. And what you will find are the various events that are being supported in your local community. I'm from Worcester, so last night I was riding my electric assist Trek mountain bike around city streets with the Extinction Rebellion flag flying behind me, bellowing like a distressed elephant to draw attention to the fact that we need to do more. We really need to step up a lot. Okay, so on September 20th is going to be the youth-led movement. This is when students from campuses, schools across the community are going to converge and provide a focus for what is happening locally. And then on September 28th is everyone else. If you're like me, older, okay. This is another moment in the Climate Strike Week where we're going to converge and we are going to yell and shout in order to draw attention to what needs to be done. So what I'm hoping again that you're going to do, #climate strike. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody. There's more food on the table. Before everybody leaves, we would love to have a group photo so we can put it on the PDA Mass.